Yo, 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 what is going on, RoK Familia? It is your boy BN, aka Mr. Kingdom Builder, and today I wanted to touch on what I thought was, I don't know if I want to say it's a touchy subject, but I do think it is yet another important topic to really just cleanse, if you will. And this is the topic of saying this as delicately as possible, right? The art of just not getting butthurt. And I'm going to expand on what I mean by this, and I also am going to dive into how it is that there is a portion of players out there who are just extremely gullible and take too many things at face value. And I'm going to give you a couple examples, and I'm going to walk you through this thought process because it's very important to have a good, realistic understanding, expectation of all of this when it comes to how you start out in a kingdom, throughout that kingdom's life, or just the beginning, the middle, the end stages, right? Once you kind of get to that KBK1 and beyond, on having a good, rational, just perseverance, if you will, right? Mental perseverance is probably a good way of putting it. So before we dive into everything, and I potentially show how shallow and then how not shallow, right, some players may and may not be through these explanations, as you hope to self-assess yourself, if that makes sense. If you enjoy the content, make sure you sub, like, ring the notification bell. Of course, if you want to join and be a part of our conversation, hit up the Discord. You can find a link to that in the pinned comment description right down below. Okay, so let's say that you're starting off in a kingdom. And remember, things are always going to be popping off in world chat. That's just a fact. You're always going to be having people, you know, saying whatever they are. It doesn't matter what kingdom you're in. You are always going to be in a situation where there will always be some players who will antagonize, they will say things that aren't true, maybe flat out lie, right? Betrayals may happen. You can get into a situation where maybe you think that players or an alliance is going to come after you or come after your group, or threats are happening here or there. People are talking about taking control or, you know, wanting to, you know, run this piece, if you will. And what I want to explain is that these things, when they happen, you should always, 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 always analyze the situation first. And I'm going to give you a good quality example. Let's say that and again, right, I'm just going to click on some random alliance here, or just an alliance here, right? So let's say this, I guess this is an okay example, right? So let's say this alliance here, RY33 in this kingdom, 1 billion power, they got 48 out of 95, alliance level 8, right, decent territory. This is not necessarily an active alliance, right? You can tell that this is probably a farm, it's just an extra alliance that has some territory. Right, another example here is you can kind of just tell and look at some of the power, right? You probably have some, right, again, this could maybe be second accounts, possibly. These could be maybe just some lower powered mains that are coming in. But in this kingdom, which I think is an Imperium, if they still are for 2133, I'd have to check the recent rankings. But the point is that they're an alliance that's here kind of on the outskirts, right? That's an example of one. Let me see if I could find another good example. How about this Boru alliance? Maybe this will be a better one. Here we go. This is a great example. So let's say this alliance, 173 mil, 22 to 68 spots, territory 33, alliance level 1, right? This is clearly a farm or just a really low-level alliance if they're still actively playing for anyone there. If this alliance, or there was members, let's say 5 members in this alliance decided, you know what, we're going to go into world chat and we're going to, or into kingdom chat, I'm going to say world chat, and they say something to the effect of, you know, we're going to bring a bunch of people over here and we're gonna get king, or we're gonna start taking over or this region, right? Let's do something more realistic. Let's say they say, okay, you know, we're gonna go ahead and start taking over this province, right? And then you have others that look at that situation and think to themselves, okay, you know, hey, you know, they just threatened us, or threatened to start taking over this and clearing everyone else out. But let's say that nothing happens immediately. However, the other side, who heard the threats, starts to react impulsively, and they decide, you know what, we're going to go ahead and just clear them out. We don't want to have to worry about it. Let's go ahead and just go right for the CF. We'll destroy it, And you know what, maybe for good measure, we'll just go ahead and TP out their players that are there. In this situation, if nothing has happened yet, and there's no actual indication that steps or actionable steps are happening, you have fallen victim to your own gullibleness. Meaning, like we talked about, is that you should be taking these things with a grain of salt. If people are throwing empty threats, right, that's how you kind of have to view it, right? You view it as an empty but cautionary tale, right? It's an empty threat, but you're cautious about it, meaning that you're just, maybe kind of slightly paying attention to it, and it's just on your radar. But until something happens, right, there's nothing tangible, right? There's nothing actionable. And this is something that far too often happens in kingdoms, where you will have players that'll make threats, or they'll use foul language, or they'll come off as D-bags or a-holes, whatever it may be, right? Whatever your vernacular of choice is, and you'll have players that will feel threatened, or they'll say, you know what, if you're going to keep talking like that, I'm just going to zero you. And far too often, again, in these types of kingdoms where you have players, and every kingdom will have players, just depending on how many, that will act in these types of unfrivolous and just unfortunate, ill-intended ways. It is really up to the leadership in those kingdoms, and also to alliance leadership, not only subject to kingdom leadership, that they should be able to appropriately assess the capabilities of said threats, right? First off, you have to assess the capability of the individuals/alliances involved. Once you do that, then you can figure out kind of what the true capability is of what those people are saying, and then you go from there, right, to address. Do we need an action plan? Do we need a contingency in place? Do we even need to bother keeping an eye on this? Do we just mute them, block them, and move on with our lives and just keep it pushing, baby? That's what I'm talking about. These are things that you have to be able to do, right? Remember that as a human being, you do not have to react to everything. You do not even have to pay attention to everything. Because why? Everything's a choice. If I see something posted, I can choose not to react. I can choose to just mute someone and block them, and I'll never have to see them again. And now I'll just forget that they're even there in the kingdom, right? These are things that you have the ability to do. This is why it's really important when you are, before you act, or again, going back to what I was saying, if you're in a management type position, it is almost of the utmost important that you develop this type of skill where you are able to assess and discern what is actually something that is important to address, to keep on your radar, to keep in mind, and not just react impulsively. Don't be gullible and just believe everything someone is saying, right? Doesn't mean that you shouldn't potentially vet that information or what someone's saying, but it doesn't mean that you have to give them the satisfaction of acknowledging that they exist and that their threat or whatever they're saying exists, right? This isn't really about kind of being the bigger person, even though you could argue that's probably a little bit factored in. It's more about just being able to apply some level of rational logic to the situation and not letting your emotions control the way that you are reacting to something, when you could do your due diligence and figure out, well, there's no weight to what this person is saying. There's no way that they can do what they're saying. And then you have the other person, Joe Schmo, who's just going in on these people, or this person who's making these claims, and now look at them. They look like a, I don't want to go as far as saying like a baboon, but I'm trying to think of a better word, right? They look, how about let's just say they look ridiculous. I mean, that's, kind of a nicer way to say it. And I'm sure some of you have come across those situations. So let me do this for you. Let me put this to the test. And I'm sure, and I hope the comments can be flooded with examples, scenarios, experiences that you all have had. I want you to tell me either an experience you had where you saw this happening. You saw someone, a group of people, a small alliance, a group of alliances, whatever it may be, that you saw them make some type of threat, but there was just no way they were going to be able to do that. Or you vetted it and you found out there was no way they were going to be able to do it, and you acted accordingly, right? You didn't act impulsively. And then I'd be curious to hear the opposite of the same situation, but when you saw someone or leadership or management act impulsively, and how did it go? Did it go good? Did it go bad? How did that affect the kingdom overall? Did now the narrative change and these people kind of came across as bullies, which kind of started, slowly tarnishing their reputation, and that caused ripple effects down the road, right? I'm curious to hear any of your experiences where you saw someone fall victim to their own gullibleness of believing at face value what people are saying just without any level of due diligence. And I'm sure we're probably going to hopefully get some good stories, because this is something I think is really important. And it's far too often I'll go into a kingdom and I'll see these things happening, and then it's just the opposition who you're trying to look at as being the kind of heralds of the kingdom, or they're in this position to set good examples, and they're just not. It doesn't mean that everyone is. I don't mean to lump every single person in those types of situations. It's usually always a group or a limited amount of people that are typically like rawr and rawr and rawr, 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 right? And it's just back and forth. So with that in mind, I would love to hear, let me know in those comments down below. I hope this video is helpful for those if you are in a position right now, because there is something to be said about things such as professional courtesy, about being humble, being graceful in the way that you approach things, having a level of TLC, tender love and care, when you go about really trying to figure out what is actually doable and what's not doable. So something can be said. That is a skill. Okay, that is it for me. As always, I will catch you guys later. Until next time, I think I said that opposite, but yeah, you guys get the picture.